Well, we might as well kind of get rolling. I mean, we've got six of us here to start with. That'll do. So, Chad, not everybody will have their video on, so that's just
Yeah, no worries.
there's always people looking over our shoulders that are they're in their underwear and they don't want to be seen or whatever. Um, but yeah, so we've been talking so much about crew sort of here and there throughout the past several months, well, even several years, where people have just been asking just sort of the basic questions, and I can handle some of those, but I'm getting to the limits of my understanding just based on my
Sure.
experiences, and so I figured let's bring in Chad. I mean, I thought it'd be fun to have
Yeah.
both of you on there, but I guess not.
Yeah, unfortunately, she's gone back to school for Tuesdays and Thursdays nights, so she's getting her master's degree in management. So
Sweet. Well, that's great. It is
yeah,
what it is. It is what it is. Now I thought maybe folks would uh, have questions, but if you wanted to maybe beforehand, just kind of a little bit about yourself, so that people kind of get a sense
sure.
of who you are.
Yeah, my name is Chad Neidigh. I've been doing crew almost exclusively since 2009. Um, uh, I did, free fall up until I had, 200, 300 jumps, something like that. And then was doing free fall and crew for a while, and then just sort of stopped doing everything except for crew. And now it's a big deal whenever I go to free fall. Everybody's like, oh, you're gonna pull out the door, and uh, which actually one time a friend of mine, a wingsuiter, convinced me to do a wingsuit jump, and I got checked out on the suit, and he goes, "Oh, why don't you take the suit, go up, make a solo, and just put it back in the room when you're done." I'm like, "All right, yeah, yeah." So I'm the last one out, just like I have been for the last 2,000 jumps or whatever. And I waved to Billy, "Thanks, Billy, bye." And I leave the plane, and I reach back and I touch my packy, and I was like, "No, I just touched it, right? I didn't actually." And then I feel
No!
the opening.
Oh
So there I am at 13,000 feet with a wingsuit
13.
on, and then fast forward about a year, and one of the wingsuiters comes up and he goes, "Oh, you do crew? Hey, did you hear about the idiot crew dog who pulled right out the door?" And starts telling me the whole story of my jump. And I thought he was just busting my chops, and I was like, that was me. And he goes, "Oh my god, I didn't know."
Well, the thing is,
So
you're not the only person who's done that. I've actually heard that story from more than one person who said they were the one. So
yeah,
you don't have to
I
feel.
know a lot of tandem masters that have that same story, that
Hmm?
they go and they pulled the drogue,
Uh-huh.
only it wasn't a drogue. So that was pretty funny. But anyway, that's me. I'm a crew dog through and through. Been doing it since about 2009. Been to nationals a couple of times. Been to worlds. We took gold in 8-way speed one year. We took bronze in 2019 at worlds, and a couple world records. I don't know how many state records, and yeah, mostly doing big way stuff, but some competition too, smaller stuff, 4-way, 8-way, 2-way, and that's about it. We go around, we teach wherever people invite us to come. If your drop zone is within driving distance and you got people that show interest, we show up with gear. We go do a safety briefing. We talk through all the interesting new fun ways to kill yourself and how to not do that. Our number one safety briefing is don't die, and we do take that very seriously. And so far, most people abide by that. Um, but yeah, we teach it. We have all the equipment, the crew canopies, the crew specific gear. We talk you through everything. We teach you how to avoid wraps and entanglements, but what happens if you do get into a wrap or an entanglement, and ways to get out of it. And the biggest thing is don't panic and stop doing things, when it's time, when it's your hard deck, so that you can get ready to land and you have enough time to recover from any of the craziness that's going on, and you can walk away and do it again.
Do it
So
again, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, part of it, of my hope in this conversation is to talk about wraps and entanglements, current methodology, current thought process. But if we start right there, I don't know. I think it may not necessarily lure people in as much as first talking about, how likely it is. How often do you actually chop, and how often do you go up and have an amazing crew jump where nothing crazy happens at all? It's nothing but fun.
right.
I
Well, I
think
mean,
that story needs to be told.
so that story, it's easier to ask than it is to answer. People,
Mm-hmm.
if you think about, how safe is skydiving? Well, how safe is a tandem skydive? Almost never do you hear of a tandem going horribly wrong. They rarely have to ever use their reserve. They rarely have people running into them. But in 16 way, how often do you get into a collision? Well, more often, because you've got more people and you're interested more in the competition, and you're pushing that envelope to go faster and faster and faster. So how often do we get into entanglements versus how often would you as a newbie get into an entanglement? That's a very different thing.
Yeah,
I've had, I think, let's see, 3 cutaways doing crew,
that's
and
not a lot. I mean,
that's not a lot.
yeah.
I've never had on my one-on-one with a newbie, I've never had any sort of entanglement, wrap, cutaway, any of the things that we've discussed. Never had that happen. Now, in competition or doing big way, when we're pushing the envelope and doing stuff, sure, we things happen. Um, so you have to be prepared. You have to know what to do in those cases. But just like your first jump course, they talk about horseshoe malfunctions. How many of us have had a horseshoe malfunction?
Yeah.
I bet nobody in this room's had a horseshoe malfunction, except for maybe you, Brian.
Nope,
Um,
I haven't.
uh, you know, um, I've had a hard pull on a pilot chute, but I don't know that I've ever had one stuck, like totally stuck in there. Um, Various things like that. I've never had most of the things that we've done in the first jump course, but we talk about them and they're very important, and we should continue to talk about them because those are the things that if they do happen, however unlikely they are, they're going to save your life.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we talk about in our first jump course. That's what the wingsuiters talk about in their first jump course. I don't want to speak for them, but I know when I went through my wingsuit first jump course, they taught me all the ways that a wingsuit can kill you, and I've never had to do any of that either, thankfully. So yeah, it is something that you have to keep in mind. You have to keep serious. This is an extreme sport, and you are doing an extreme version of the extreme sport when you do crew, but it can be done safely. And I honestly think that more crew should be done as a student when you're young and malleable and open to more things.
It may,
And if you had instructors that could fly next to you, I'm not saying contact crew. You don't have to do, because it's canopy relative work. You don't have to touch in order to be relative to someone. If an instructor grabbed a student canopy and went up there and flew next to you, you would learn so much more than if you just do these, when you do a hard toggle turn, a hard toggle 360, how much altitude did you lose? Well, you can look at your altimeter and you can say, okay, I dropped 100 feet. Well, what does that mean when you're relative to somebody? When you're actually sitting there next to somebody and you see what a drop of 100 feet looks like, you're like, wow, I can spiral and get below somebody that's coming at me. I don't have to hit them. I don't have to panic and do anything else. If I'm a little bit lower, all I have to do is take a mild evasive action and get away from the thing that's causing me to be in danger. And I can use more of my brain. I can use more of my skills, and that's something that we can teach our newer skydivers, our younger skydivers. Crew doesn't have a limit. We don't have to wait until you have 200 jumps like we do with wingsuits. It's all a matter of, can you safely jump the size parachute that I have to loan to you? And can I get a size parachute that will fly relative with you? We can go up there and do, crew on 300s, and it's still crew. Um, so I encourage everyone to at least sit through a crew briefing, and I'd be happy to give one if anybody wants a crew safety briefing. It takes about an hour, hour and a half if I get chatty, which I often do, telling stories and whatnot. But yeah, just listening to why everyone I feel should jump with a good hook knife, and by a good hook knife I mean one that's made of all metal,
Thank you for
not
saying
these plastic things. There's actually a video that was floating around. I'll send it to you, Brian. That was on YouTube that I think should be on every safety day because so many things went wrong, and it shows that every skydiver should jump with a good hook knife accessible. Because if he had a hook knife, his jump would have. I mean, he made it through the jump, but he did all the things that he could. But it would have been a much better, much less stressful skydive for him if he'd had just a simple hook knife,
Yeah.
a simple, good, solid. I mean, they're $40. It sounds like a lot. It's like, oh, I could buy a whole jump for that. It's like one whole jump. Sacrifice one jump for, the safety of your life. Come on.
Yep.
But I see so many people not jumping with hook knives, not even a crappy hook knife. It's like, if you need a hook knife, you're in a bad situation, and it
Great.
doesn't take much to put one on your rig. They
No,
make
it
them
doesn't.
small enough, and any qualified master rigger can put a little pouch either on your leg strap or on your mud flaps or wherever.
Yeah.
So just simple things like that.
Yeah, those orange plastic ones are garbage. They're
They're garbage.
it's a placebo. It makes you think you
Yeah,
have one, but you don't have one. But the other part I would add is that we need to physically practice pulling them out because where people stow them possibly is actually a hard to reach place.
yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
when you're hanging in your harness, and so I think that's the time to do it. Not just in the loading area when your gear is hanging down with weight, but when you
Yeah,
actually suspend yourself in your gear and practice pulling it out and not dropping
yeah,
it.
yeah. The running joke is, why does a crew dog jump with 99 hook knives? Because we couldn't find any place to put the 100th one.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but yeah, I typically jump with at least two, one on two on my chest strap, the longer versions, so that I can get to them with either hand, with either the right hand or the left hand.
oh, that's interesting.
Um, and I have also on one of my rigs, I have it on the leg strap, and another one on a mud flap. So depending on the rig, I usually jump with at least three hook knives. Um, but just simple like that.
Yeah,
You're right, we should practice just like we practice our touches. We stand there, and before loading the plane, you see a lot of people touch their hacky, they'll touch their cutaway handle and their reserve, and we should be getting into this mentality of where's my hook knife. Especially if you jump multiple rigs with a hook knife in multiple locations, you should know exactly where all of your emergency equipment is.
right. Yeah, agreed. Agreed. I love it. It's so when you get somebody started with crew, obviously there's a briefing where you got to get into the nitty gritty of
Yeah,
emergency procedure stuff. But as far as the plan, so
yeah,
so I'm sure you just do two-way, one instructor,
yeah.
one student. And do you routinely you go to full altitude no matter what?
Yeah, so if we can, my typical first jump would be I let the student leave first, and I ask them to give me a 3 to 5 second delay before, and they do it just a straight regular hop and pop. And you'd be amazed at how many experienced skydivers cannot do a head high emergency hop and pop. And that's another thing that I think we need to practice more often. So many people, when you see them doing hop and pops, they're doing flips out the door, or they're doing, back to the wind, and they're looking all cool and flashing signs. They can't just stand in the door, look at the wing, and keep their head high and pull within 5 seconds. And that's what you need to do if the plane's on fire or the pilot tells you to get the hell out of the aircraft.
Yep.
You need to be able to do a head high hop and pop. So we teach them, we go back through, even if they've got, 6,000 skydives, I go through and I teach them how to do a head high hop and pop. And I have them practice that on the ground. I'll have them go out and I'll tell them, give me at least 3 seconds, no more than 5 seconds. And that gives me some separation from the plane, and it gets them nice and low.
Mhm.
Then I can leave and I can pull immediately as soon as I clear the door.
Yeah.
And now I've got forward and height, because that's the power position. I can always come back. I can always go down. I can't always go forward. I can't always go up. So if I'm forward and above, I've got the position of power, and I've got the advantage. And I'll come back however I need to in order to park right next to them. I park next to them, and we go through all of our controls. So I will typically park next to them. If I have radios, I'll tell them, but typically we don't have radios. And I'll look over and I'll nod, and I'll pull down on my front risers, and I'll hold my front risers for about 3 seconds. Now, what do front risers do? Well, they pull you forward and down. So relative to the student, I will go down and forward.
Mhm.
And then when I stop and I go back to full flight, I will be lower and in front of them.
Mhm.
And then they have to match my level, just like in when you were going through AFF, if you went through AFF, if you weren't a static line student. But in AFF, the coach will go down and you have to match their level. So they might have to hold their front risers for 4 seconds or 2 seconds or however long it takes for them to get down to my level, and then let go and match my level. And then I'll reset, and then we'll go through the rear risers. And the rear risers relative to the student is like an elevator. It'll take you almost directly up, but it won't take you back.
Right.
So then they have to match my level. And then we'll do toggles, and I'll hit the brakes really hard, go into deep brakes, and that'll bring me up and back. And then they have to match my level. Now they typically can't see me because I'm in their blind spot, but I've got a good vantage point. I'm looking straight down on them, and I'm not going to let the student come in and wrap me. I can move out of the way. So I just tell them, hold it for about 3 seconds. If you can't see me, if you don't know where I am, just hold it for 3 seconds and I'll eventually get in your view. And then that's our 6 controls. If I have time and altitude, then I will show them what's called a sachet, which is a quick turn. It's less of a turn more than a violent moving of the canopy to spill some air, and it'll allow me to spill air before I turn and then come back down, and that allows me to kill altitude, and I'll come straight down instead of going left or right. And then I'll have them match, and we'll talk about that. We talk about that on the ground, to how to do that maneuver. And then after that, if we have time and I feel comfortable, what I will do is I will have them slide over and try and run the nose of their canopy right across the back, the small of my back. And I will then, if they do it slow enough and smooth enough, I'll be able to count the lines. And we always jump 7 cells. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll put my feet in their lines. And now we're a 2-stack. And I'll let go and I'll go to the opposite side. Now they have to come in from the opposite side and do the same thing, nice and slow, drag the front of that parachute, the nose of that canopy right across my back, and I'll kick in and I'll grab them. If
So,
they come too fast, then I fly away. I get out of the way.
question.
Yep.
So that means, so when you do your initial cherry pins, you have them pin you first
Yes.
before you come in and get them. That's interesting.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Because
that wasn't
that
my
way,
experience in crew.
and we learned from a lot of that, right? So anytime you dock on someone else, you're giving up control, right? The only person who has control is the person on top.
Hmm.
So if I want to kick in my feet, I can. And
Hmm.
as the instructor, I'm the one that has more knowledge and more ability to assess whether or not I should be doing this.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and I almost never, unless I really know the person and I know how, their experience with a newbie, I will never on the first jump give up that control. and dock on them.
Well, and
Um,
I mean, to share my own personal experience, right? No training.
yeah,
Basically, I just had Barry Whaling just came up after an RW jump, and hit me with his canopy close to the center cell. He said, grab on to my canopy," and I got my foot stuck in inside of his center cell,
yeah,
like way inside, and now I'm like, really
yeah,
inside the canopy with like 30 jumps, and if you really think about it, yeah, there's if that had gone badly, the one guy who really knows what he's doing doesn't have a parachute anymore.
yeah. And I'm assuming that that was with old Dacron Lines
Oh,
parachutes, right?
yeah, that's all
Um,
we had.
and if you do that today, which I see people doing that today
Yeah,
with these Spectra lines and HMA lines and Vectran lines, these super thin lines, the thinner the line, the more it will slice,
yeah,
it will completely slice the meat of your legs off.
oh yeah,
Um, Vectran and HMA will actually cut through bone. So
yeah,
you could actually lose a foot in a really bad, high tension wrap. Spectre, you probably won't lose your bone, but you could fillet your calf. You might not walk it
yeah,
properly again. The lines that we jump, they're Dacron, they're nice and fat. They
mhm,
hurt. You'll get line burns, but
yeah,
it's no worse than a rug burn.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I
so
think that's important. But back in
doing
those days, everybody had 7 cells.
right, and
That's
back
all we had.
back in those days, you jump much bigger parachutes with much kinder lines. It still wasn't smart. You still had cascading lines that you could get your foot stuck on. You still had trailing pilot chutes
Mhm.
that you could get wrapped around your foot. There was a lot of what we call stupid crew going on, but
Yeah.
at least it wasn't as stupid a crew as it is today.
Well,
So
especially when you see, these really tiny canopies,
yes, yes,
super fast, 60 square foot canopies doing
right.
crew. I just don't think it leads a good example, even if you can't.
I I agree. I agree. If it's absolutely necessary for whatever it is that you're doing, and all participants are knowledgeable in crew and have talked about it and know the risks and everything else, it sets a bad example for everybody else. But so does Luigi flying that 47 square foot canopy. I mean, if I flew a 47 square foot canopy, I wouldn't be here. So um, but I understand that he's got more skills in that area than I do. So um, I think it sets a bad example, and I see people doing it all the time, and I just shake my head and have a private talk with them whenever I can. But at the end of the day, we're all adults, and we make the decisions that we make. I'm sure that there's a lot of people that would like to sit me down and have a talk with me and tell me how dangerous any skydiving is, and
Sure. Yep.
in one ear and out the other. I'm like, yeah, yeah, okay.
we have our own. Everybody's got their own frame of reference for
That's
what's
it.
what's suicidal and what isn't, and what's a
Yeah,
worthwhile risk where you feel like you've got enough control over
absolutely,
the circumstances, right? We were talking
absolutely.
about that earlier today. It's like my swooping might look nuts to your typical crew dog. To me, I'm a
Yep,
very very conservative swooper.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
I find it funny when because our canopies recover so quickly.
yes, they do.
If I'll do a 90 or even a 270 to come into land, and I'll suck that thing down dirty low,
Yeah,
and I'll let up on the fronts, and it'll flatten out, and I'll land and everything. But the swoopers see that, and they're like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you were on your fronts until 20 feet." And I'm like,
yeah.
that was high.
It's because in full flight you're already in rears.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So everybody has their comfort level. Everybody has their own experience. And at the end of the day, we have to make our own decisions.
Yeah, I wonder about the reasoning, design wise, to make a CRW parachute have such a short recovery arc. I wonder what the function is. Um,
Recovery from
it died.
whirlies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all you want to be up there as long as you can. You want to as much airtime as possible, and that means make it as flat as you can. Anytime that you get into a wrap, you want it to recover quickly and not keep diving. Various reasons for that. The triathlon is a steeper canopy than the Lightning.
Sure. And the
Um,
Express, remember the Express? You know, some of these
the
canopy
Express, the old
were.
Express, those were almost impossible to have front risers.
Mhm.
But really, the Lightning is built so that the front riser pressure is about the same as the rear riser pressure. So you wanted that maneuverability to go, in that 3D, that truly 3D space. And in order to do that, you have to sacrifice somewhere. And you sacrifice that in the steepness, because anytime you put that steepness down, now you're putting more pressure on those fronts.
Sure.
So you lose that ability to use front risers. Now the Storms get by with it because they're flying almost exclusively in quarter breaks, because it's almost exclusively a two-way canopy, and you're just flying in quarter breaks. And if you want to go down, instead of pulling on your fronts, you just let it fly, and it dives down. So different technique, different canopy design, same company, PD.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, the Lightning was built for big way. It was built to stay up in the air for as long as it can, and to have all of the six controls be similar
And balanced. Yeah.
and balanced.
Yeah. So
And
that's the prime. So if you show up with a whole buttload of canopies for your students to try in a crew
yep,
camp, you're Lightning.
I'm all Lightnings.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. That's interesting.
So we have a Storm for a different purpose, but for doing camps, for doing anything but video, we use all Lightnings. Now you could use all triathlons, you could use all Storms. The primary thing you want to try and do is get everything the same.
Yeah.
You want to get wing loading the same, and the same type of parachute with the same line set trim. So we have what's called a world record line set trim, and that's what everybody flies.
It's universal.
Unless you have a very good reason for deviating from that, everybody gets the world record trim.
Yeah. 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 For sure. Now, Oleg recently did. Was it a couple weeks ago? Did his pup camp, CRW pup. And did
Oh,
you
down in
guys?
Florida?
No, he's out west,
Out west. Okay.
out Cali. Right. So which drop zone did you do that one?
That was at Elsinore with Kyle.
Elsinore. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Kyle Taylor.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kyle's a good
Yeah.
guy.
And that was Lightnings as well, right?
Yeah, he said that all recreational CRW in the US is Lightnings.
Yeah.
And I can't do CRW because I'm not on 1.3 wing loading yet. So I have to wait.
You can't do big way. You can do small way.
I mean,
Right.
if I go down, if I find an instructor that has gear, that has a
Right.
big Lightning for me and is willing to go on a light wing loading, but
Yeah.
everybody owns a 1.3 wing loading, so I can't just randomly pick people.
Right.
And Kyle has a big wait list, so I can't really do that, and I don't really want to travel all over the U.S. just to,
Yeah.
So I have to
It's
wait.
tough. It's tough. Yeah, that's why there's a few pockets that have instructors with gear hoarding issues like myself. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Well,
yeah, the Cali boys. There's quite a lot of crew going on in Southern California and Elsinore and in that region. But yeah, it's tough. They're doing a lot of competitions. They're doing a lot of training, so they're busy.
But I'm glad I did it early, even though I learned a ton. But like you said, I got the safety briefing and I got to experience the relative flight, and it was really fun. And I did take a bunch of notes that I rewrote, and I actually posted them on the network. I don't know if you saw them, but it was just a Google Doc. It was around the time you were 6. You might not have seen them, but it has the diagram with the different controls, visual reference. So yeah.
right.
Now, did you find that was helpful in your free fall and thinking of landing in large groups? Because do you normally jump at Elsinore?
No, I don't. I was visiting, and I've
Okay.
been bugging them for a while to try to get me into one while I visited. So,
But did you find a lot of the things that a lot of the stuff that you learned in the crew camp could be applied in flying, with random strangers just trying to land at your drop zone with
yes.
your free fall gear?
So I used to be very cautious about proximity flying. Like anytime anybody got near me in the pattern, like there's been a couple times I landed out because people were too close.
Yep.
And now I'm much more comfortable about my ability to avoid them, and like what is too close, or are we on a collision path? So like I that definitely improved that.
That's great. Great.
I think it's one of the best parts of crew is to when you recognize that a pattern is a formation, and then you get used to that perspective. You don't have people overcompensating, causing a new danger.
Yep.
I've seen that so many times. We're like, well, I don't want to be close to anybody, and they do something that they didn't really need to do. They needed to do this, and instead they did this,
Yep. Absolutely.
and they got hurt because of their fear. So how do you get over your fear of a monster under your bed? You climb under your bed.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
that's what crew is all about.
That
Yep.
was a big motivation for me because I came from paragliding, and my senses of how everything flew was like it was always getting mixed up with paragliding, and I had never flocked before even. So that did help
Yeah.
out that as well.
Yeah, Scott just showed up a few minutes ago, so I'm sorry I didn't notice that you were knocking on the door. That happens like every time. And so
Okay.
Chad is here as promised. We're just discussing basic CRW and that sort of thing. And obviously, this is not a substitute for a crew course. If you're going to do it with the right people and do it over a long period of time in person. Um,
Yeah.
I think it's great. I mean, I don't do it very much anymore, but I love where it leads, and of course, the no contact stuff is the part that I'm jazzed about the most because anybody can do it.
Yeah. I would highly recommend anybody that has any interest in canopy flight at all, or wants to, if you don't have access to somebody like myself, or the ability to go see somebody like myself, where you can actually do crew with crew specific gear and have full contact crew, you can go up at any drop zone and do relative work safely amongst yourselves. You just have to make sure that your distance increases, and you have to talk about hand signals and what hand signals mean because you're so far away. But you can go up and fly next to each other and see how your canopies perform together, and play with your controls and your rear risers and your your toggles. Just flying next to somebody and doing a 360 and seeing how much you drop in a 360, just that alone is eye-opening. And doing all of the different maneuvers, and just go up and put 30 feet between you guys, and you don't have to be anywhere close to where you're going to have to worry about, oh, do I have the right lines, do I have the right gear? You don't have to be anywhere close to each other. You're closer than that on flying in on the pattern, so you should be comfortable being that close at 10,000 feet. And as long as you both you have a rule where only one person is making big moves, then you're fine. So one person is always the base, they're flying stable, and they're paying attention to the spot, they're paying attention to making sure you get back home. And the other person is allowed to do whatever maneuvers they need to do or want to do or try to do. And they get, you'll end up getting lower. And then once you're so low, you are now the person that plays base, and the other person gets to play around and do 360s or sachets, or play with their fronts or rears or rear stalls and toggle stalls and anything else next to somebody, so you see how much you drop and change relative to someone else. And that's crew. That's relative work. And you're doing it with your canopy. So therefore it is canopy relative work. You do not have to touch somebody. You do not have to risk a wrap or an entanglement in order to do crew safely. And you don't need any special training. The only thing I would suggest is you make sure you know how to do a high pull and get back to the drop zone. So read the winds aloft, because it's very different than picking the spot for free fall, because you don't have free fall drift, you have canopy drift. So talk to an AFF instructor, talk to somebody who's done a lot of high pulls to know where you should be getting out and where you should be doing this, and pay attention to where you are. This is why crew dogs get the reputation for landing out so often, is because we lose focus on making sure we get home, and we're too busy playing, especially if we're training for competition, we get turned off and we're off our wind line. So if you're going to go do crew on your own without any training, you can do it safely. Just make sure that one thing that you always make sure you get back home, and jump with a cell phone. Always jump with a cell phone, because if you do land out, you can land. I've landed out as far as 6 miles off of the drop zone. I needed a cell phone to let people know, one, I was okay. They didn't need to send fire rescue ambulance. And
Very true.
two, where to come pick me up. So
yeah,
those are the two things.
I would add that when you're doing the no contact version of this stuff, you're not stuck on a heading as much. You know, so if you're building a big diamond, this is the direction it's going to point. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it will continue that way. Whereas if it's just the two-way, or even as you get better, you can do no contact crew with more than one other parachute. You can look at the situation. We're getting a little, off the wind line, or we've been in a run for a long time. Maybe we should 180 it. And just because you're not touching, you can signal the direction. You make the turn together, quite possibly switching slots, right?
Yep.
You can't do this very much. Little turns, sure, but bigger than that, you switch slots, and that's fun. That's one of my
very
favorite
fun
things. I love
It's
slots. As you're rotating, whether it's a 180 or not is irrelevant. You can do even just a 45-degree turn.
Yeah. And even if you don't want to end up ultimately getting into, crew like as I do it, you can get into flocking. There's a lot of high-speed canopy pilots out there that have found the joy of crew in doing, these high-speed flocks. I believe you even go up to, was it Finland, and throw lines through the canyons.
Not so much. Finland sucks for that, but primarily Norway. That's my favorite.
Norway.
Yeah,
okay.
The Finland's flat, dude.
Is it?
It's flat,
Okay.
crazy flat. Sweden too, mostly, with the exception of one mountain called Ora, which is on the Norwegian border. But there are so many lines there that we just plan it out, and we drop our jump run in sort of reverse order. With the heaviest wing loading is going to be the leader will be kind of the last one out, and then they do a 180 wrap around, and they fly back down the jump run and just pick up the people in a line. And follow the leader is another sort of branch of this stuff that's very different, right? So like tunnel flying, you've got static stuff, whether it's head down or belly, where you're staying in place and you're trying to change your orientation or the formation without moving around much. We call static. But there's also the dynamic version of crew where you're following people and you've got to be like switching to the rears and you go to the fronts and you're sporting every input, and that's fun.
It's all canopy relative work. This is all.
But
it's all crew.
That's a big difference, right?
Sure.
And I think that if the average,
but you gain a lot of the same skills building on. You can transition from one to the other with relative ease. It's all knowing how to fly your parachute. Knowing all your inputs
to get some serious crew dogs and say, well, instead of doing a static formation, we're going to do something a little bit more elaborate, and and have a follow the leader kind of thing. When you watch tracking dives and Atmo, or the angle flying, I really believe that as we get better at this dynamic crew, this sort of flowing stuff, that we could probably do anything that they do on an angle jump, including the figure eight weaving through, right? You see that in the tunnel as well. It could be done with the right people.
Yeah. I
imagine how
totally
beautiful that would be with smoke.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, so we're not done inventing the sport.
No.
How cool is that? So, all right. So I know that one of the most important reasons to have you here as well is to talk about the distinction between wraps and entanglements, and what those procedures are. I talked for a while, with maybe an hour or so, with Wendy Faulkner, picking her brain a little bit, and but we didn't do that as part of the group. That was me just sort of catching up on current events. But I would like to get your perspective first of all. How would you define the difference? By the way, your article that you did with Magdalene is freaking awesome, and it's on our website thing.
Great.
Our
Glad to
website. People loved it.
Glad to see people are still reading.
No, you guys
Um,
knocked that one out of the park. But let's be
so for
different.
me, you know, people talk about, you know, oh, a wrap is this and an entanglement has to have this. And I boil it down to, I wanted to make it much simpler. How many parachutes are functioning? Is going to determine whether I'm in a wrap or an entanglement, and how I proceed. So in a wrap, typically you'll have one canopy wrapped around somebody and the other one is still flying. So in a wrap, I have one functioning canopy. Whether I'm entangled in lines or not is irrelevant. Whether I have actual lines or canopy wrapped around me is irrelevant. If I have one functioning canopy, it is considered a wrap. And the way I deal with a wrap is going to be different than the way I deal with an entanglement. An entanglement typically has both canopies entangled in each other. Now, that typically what it looks like in my world is one person went through the lines of somebody else's, and you're trying to pull that canopy through the lines of the other person, which obviously doesn't work. And so now it's fouled both canopies. If both canopies are fouled, it's an entanglement, regardless of how it happened, why it happened, anything else. So a wrap is the easiest one to deal with and to talk about. And the bottom person is the person that does not have a functioning parachute, because the functioning parachute is above the head of the high person. Um, and typically that lower person really doesn't have anything that they can or can't do to help the situation. There's some things that they can do to make the situation worse, but there's not a whole lot that they can do typically to make it better. So the top person, the person who is wrapped, has to do the fixing. And typically that's, you know, pushing fabric either down and getting that fabric off of them, or crawling out to where they can clear and get clear of any lines or obstructions. We do not cut away, especially in a wrap, we do not cut away that functioning parachute unless we are absolutely 100% sure that I am clear and free of all lines and obstructions. Because the worst thing you want to do, you do not want to get rid of a functioning parachute if you're only going to have something wrapped around your arm or leg or foot or worse, neck or something else. Because if you cut that away, now you're in free fall with something attached to you. And that's much harder to deal with. So you absolutely have to get rid of whatever is wrapped around you. Now, most of the time we can push that wrap off of us and we get free and clear without having to cut away. And then we call that a whirly. It wasn't really a wrap because nobody had to cut away. So we just whirled around, and if one person has to cut away, then it was an official wrap. But uh, you know, it keeps our numbers down. So, but the way you can push that away, you can break out the hook knife and cut the lines, cut the fabric or whatever as a last resort. It's just gear. At the end of the day, if your life is in danger or your friend's life is in danger, slice the gear. Uh, Now, that being said, if you had another option like kicking a shoe off and you sliced my gear, I'm going to be a little upset that you sacrificed your, you were unwilling to sacrifice your $10 Walmart shoe, instead of my $2,000 parachute. But so that's a wrap. Basically, it happens when somebody usually comes in at too steep of an angle, and I grab hold of it in what we call hard point, which is stop one corner of the parachute and the other one wants to keep flying, and it wraps you around. So that's a wrap. An entanglement. Both parachutes are fouled, and those typically will take a couple of different forms. You'll have one where both of you are spinning and you're orbiting each other, in which case you almost never have anything actually attached to you on any of your arms or legs. You're just, both of your parachutes are entangled and you're both spinning around. In which case you check and make sure, yes, I don't have anything on me. Just go ahead and cut away. Because the way you're both spinning, I don't know if you can see this, the way you're both spinning, When one of you cuts away, you're going to get thrown away from the formation or the entanglement. And if you both cut away at the same time, you're both going to get flung in opposite directions. So you don't have any danger of hitting each other.
Right. Is there an order to that structure?
It doesn't matter. So orbits like this, when you're both spinning, it's so high speed. You want to get out of it as quickly as you can so that you don't lose any blood to your brain, and just go. If you're both spinning, if you're the person spinning, whether it's you or both of you, if you're spinning and you have a chance to cut away immediately. As long as you don't have anything attached to you, you don't have anything on your leg or foot or arm, go. Don't worry about it. You'll be thrown away from the shit. The other situation is where one person is an anchor and the other person is orbiting. Now this does have an order. The person orbiting is the one you want to cut away first. Now, keeping in mind that that person that's orbiting is experiencing massive G-forces, and they can only hold consciousness for so long. And it's about 3 rotations and they start to get a little fuzzy. At about the 4th, they're starting to pass out. So as that anchor, you're sitting there watching this and going, come on, man, cut away, cut away, cut away, cut away. And if they don't cut away fast enough, you have to then cut away. And what that does is that changes the system. You have to change the system because they might have lost their handle. They might have passed out already. You're the anchor. You're the one that's keeping this system in that position. If you cut away, you release that weight, and that person is now the weight, and it changes the system. So now they're falling, and now they get blood going to their brain. They can deal with whatever's going on. The tension is less. It's a totally different situation that they're in. You want to give them the opportunity to cut away first. If they don't, or if it's taking too long, you have to make the decision to cut away. That was my actual first crew cutaway. Is I was the anchor, and the person didn't cut away fast enough. They went around about 3 times, and I cut away. And as soon as I cut away, the system, all the tension on their rig changed, and they could see their cutaway handle, and they cut away, and we both landed under reserves, laughed about it, had a beer, paid our rigger a bottle of whiskey to get us ready for the next day, and we were back to jumping the next day. So that's a wrap and an entanglement. Those are the 2. There's a third for the entanglement, is where you're both falling and you're next to each other. Now, typically in this situation, you'll have a ball of shit above you, and one person will be lower and one person will be slightly higher. Whoever does not have anything on them, again, we don't cut away if we have anything wrapped around our arms or a rig or a leg or anything like that. If one of you is clear, that person cuts away first. If you're both clear in some miraculous setting, then what we typically say is that the top jumper should be the one that cuts away. Now, there's some debate in the crew community as to who should do it. I always say the top person should be the one, because if the top person goes, when they slide down, they're going at such a slow rate, the worst that's going to happen is you're going to get a black eye. You're going to get an elbow to the eye. You're not going to knock the person unconscious, right? So you slide away and you leave that person with the ball of shit that's above them. You know that nothing is attached to you is going to rebound up into them. If the lower person were the one that cuts away first, they're attached down here, it could theoretically snag an arm or a helmet or something else when it's going past the upper jumper. So I always say the top person, if they're free and clear, the top person should go first.
Right. That's what I teach as well, with sort of the general principles of what we
Right.
do in my course, the no contact crew. Cool.
Yep. So that's it. A wrap. So to just to recap, a wrap, you have one functioning parachute. An entanglement, you don't have any functioning parachutes. Both parachutes are compromised in some way. And in a wrap, you have one good one,
Got it.
and that's the way. That's the difference between a wrap and an entanglement.
There it is. Thank you. Yeah, it's
Sure.
not simple. This is like the average. I
Well,
most
it's a
people
lot to think about.
don't know it.
It's a lot to talk about on the ground, but it's better to talk about it on the ground so that when your heart's racing and everything's going in slow motion and you have all of these, you're not sitting there trying to figure it out and trying to guess what the right thing to do up in the air as you're coming, you know.
I just had
coming
an
down.
idea that might be helpful with training people in preparation of this, because the ability to regurgitate information, on a test, multiple choice or whatever, and get it right. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do it in the heat of the moment, in the
Sure.
flow of the experience. And so maybe we can do a little bit more flow testing sort of model where you show video, and the person can be even in a hanging harness if you wanted to add realism, but they watch the video and you quiz them. What do we do? You
Yeah.
sort of pause the video before somebody actually takes an action, because I'm
Yeah.
sure if you were to comb the crew community, you can come up with pretty much everything that can happen has.
Right.
You know
Yeah,
what I
the
mean?
problem is getting high quality video because most of our video is from too far back
Yeah,
to really be able to see. Although with more people jumping small cameras, GoPros and whatnot. Although the GoPros and stuff have been the cause of some of these issues,
I don't doubt that.
where you get a GoPro snagged on a line and suddenly what would have been a nothing turns into a malfunction.
Right.
So
Yeah, absolutely true. And there's no view from nowhere.
yeah.
And the other question that was asked recently around our crew is what about chest mount altimeters? Because that is customary, I think, for crew dogs. Am I right about that?
Yes. So it's now that we have altimeters that we can put on our forearm
Mhm.
that don't attach to our fingers.
Yeah.
So it used to be we only had two types of altimeters, right? The wrist strap that went around the fingers, or the chest mount.
Yeah.
Now we have these digital altimeters that fit on an elastic band. Those are becoming more and more common among crew dogs because it's just easier to look at.
Yep.
And if it does get into a wrap, it slides right off of your arm, and
Sure.
it doesn't yank your wrist off like a wrist mount does.
Yeah. Have you seen a traditional chest mount actually becoming the cause of some sort of
Um,
entanglement?
yeah, but it's not. It usually it'll get hung up, and then you just oh shit, I have a line caught on my chest strap, and you pop it off. Most people have some sort of way to move that. It's a very small snag hazard. You can't eliminate all snag hazards. I
No.
mean, your helmet is a snag hazard. I've gotten lines caught underneath my helmet. I'm not going to jump without a helmet just because I'm just going to
Yeah.
be aware that that's a snag hazard.
The hook knife is a snag hazard.
Right, absolutely. My hook knife
Ironic.
setup is a snag hazard.
Totally. Yep.
But I'm gonna keep jumping with a hook knife.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you gotta be aware. I typically will jump with two altimeters, one on my chest and one on my forearm. Just I don't know, I just do.
Yeah. No, there's nothing wrong with that. And an
Yep.
audible probably as well.
No, audibles don't typically, other than they don't really add anything other than some of the landing ones, because
Well,
we're not going free fall. We're not going fast enough for them to.
I get that. I just mean in terms of like you're fighting some sort of a crazy entanglement, and it started at 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now you're getting down to like, holy crap, you got to get some nylon out there. That 2,000 foot beep would be nice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole lot of things that went wrong if I got an audible going off of my ear, and
Oh yeah. I agree with that.
mistakes have already been made. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, most of us don't jump with an audible unless we want it for landing.
yeah. Well,
One of the.
I'm just putting that out there. There
Yep.
could
Yep.
be a
Yep.
situation where
Yeah. I'm
the
sure
cost
that.
of having it is zero, other than
Right.
the price of the item and the
Sure.
battery.
Right.
But
Right.
you
Right.
know, but in terms of your life experience, it's not hurting you much.
Yeah.
But it
Same
might
thing
fly you.
with AADs. A lot of crew dogs don't jump with AADs, just because the likelihood of an AAD working for us is about the same as the chance of an AAD working against us. Um,
Yeah,
it's the
sure.
chances are so slim that it would actually help us that most crew dogs, a lot of crew dogs, will just forego the cost.
Yeah. I
And
if we're
complex.
allowed to jump, I mean, a lot of drop zones you're not allowed to jump with that one. But
Most of the AAD required drop zones will make an exception for people doing crew, just
and
like they make exceptions for people doing high speed swooping.
for CP, exactly. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I lost one of my best.
and it's for the same logic that um,
Yeah.
now with modern AADs, it used to be nobody would jump crew with an AAD at all because the likelihood of that thing going off in the middle of a formation was just too scary.
Yeah.
I've
FX
never heard of a Cypress 2 or a Vigil Quattro or the
or
what's
the
the Mars,
yeah.
whatever that one is.
Yeah.
I've never heard of a modern AAD misfiring
Yeah. Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
So
they're a lot better. And of course, you know, as far as RSL and Skyhook, I don't think there's
we we
any exceptions to that rule.
we absolutely do not jump with an RSL
Yeah,
at all.
yeah. And what's your thoughts? Of course, you know, there is a distinction with the no contact stuff. What's your
If
feeling about
if you're
that?
doing if you're doing no contact
Yeah.
and you're actually going to do no contact,
Mhm.
leave the RSL connected.
I feel the same way.
Um, if you're getting close enough to where even a remote chance that you could make contact,
Mhm.
disconnect it and remember that you have to be the one to pull silver.
Yeah. Well, you always were, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. But some people get very complacent and they'll pull that and they'll just wait for their skyhook to take in, and they'll never even bother taking the silver out of its pouch.
Yeah. Oh, it drives me nuts. Yeah, but I just noticed that when people do this kind of no contact crew, some of them will take their RSL off because they go, well, you know, I did crew and they told me to do that, and they leave the thing dangling. Or
Yeah, now
maybe
now now
that's
that
ridiculous,
right.
floating ripcord. Please don't do that. Or
Eh,
they'll put it in the right place, but they'll forget to put it back on for their next RW jump.
People
So
should be doing proper gear checks before every type of jump, and they should know what type of jump they're about to go do,
yeah,
and
yeah. Well,
and gear
my
check
point is
accordingly.
changing the configuration of your gear on a regular basis is usually not a good plan. I mean, there's exceptions, but in my opinion,
Yep.
if there's no real reason to take it off, you might as well just leave it on,
Yeah.
especially if
And,
you're trained to do this, right?
right.
Which in reality for most people is, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Oh, my RSL saved my life.
Right. Yeah, I'm old school. I've got the two hand.
Me too. Do you know
One
any?
pop
Do you
up.
know crew dogs? Like, have you polled people? Like, do crew dogs like sort of automatically switch to a two-handed cutaway because they
Uh,
might have to take a delay?
Actually, more often than not, the crew dog has to switch to a single so that they won't pull that reserve too quickly.
Hmm, interesting.
So they'll take that hand away from the reserve and put it on the cutaway just so that they don't do a pop pop.
Interesting. Well,
They'll do
I,
a pop and then delay and then pull.
one of the ideas that I've been sort of trying to spread is there's something in between the two of those because I see the validity of that idea, which is you grab them both, you cut away, and then you stack this hand on top. You didn't drop the handle, you just stack it on top. And in this process, it puts the delay in the conscious decision to fire, right? Instead of thinking they can do this or even that, right?
Yep.
So it's boom, stack, boom.
I think that's okay for experienced people, but I still agree with the new method for teaching new students, um, because you see a lot of shorter people that can't clear that student gear, and they need to sweep the cables when they pull that cutaway.
With
So
my
you have
kids,
to make sure that your cutaway cables are short enough or long, short enough to where they clear and you don't have a hang up.
yeah, I haven't. I mean, in the hanging harness, have you seen people like not physically
But
able?
people don't jump hanging harnesses, right?
I understand that. My point is, that's our test bed, right? If they actually have
Right.
a proper cutaway. My kids had some trouble getting the handle all the way out when they were, 5, 6 years old. But
Yep.
after that, even my kids were able to clear the cables,
Yep.
by extending their arm down and out all the way.
And that's something I don't see a lot of new jumpers testing now that we're talking about this is when you go to do your repack,
Yep.
testing whether or not have somebody put some tension on those and do
Risers.
your cutaway and see if your arms are actually long enough to clear. Do you need to sweep or do you have the arm length?
Yep.
I've always had the arm length on all of my rigs
It's that
to
far.
clear my cables.
That's
Yep.
the distance, right? I mean, from the housing where it exits to the
I've seen some
top
people with
of the
some
riser.
really long, yeah,
I mean,
and
that's as far as they would need to go, right?
if
You know what I mean?
if their cables are cut to the right length, if their cables are cut to the proper length.
But even then, where would that excess cable go? The handle wouldn't fit in, right? You know what I mean? Like as far as where the handle velcros on, if the cable's that
True.
long, unless it's the type where there is a little bit of play, you know what I mean? Where
Hmm.
like the vector one, it has a barrel inside there with
Right.
swage, so it can pull, so you can actually get a little bit of travel before you hit the end of it,
Yeah.
to give
And you're
increased
right with
emphasis.
newer vectors, you don't have that. I know my first rig, I could have as long a cable as I wanted because that cable had a lot of room to keep going and going and going, and I could have, made a cable long enough to
Yep.
where it wouldn't have been able to clear. But yeah, with modern gear, it kind of stops. They put a stopper and
There's limits.
you
Yeah.
have
Well,
to.
I don't know. I like to brainstorm all these things, and if what I've been
Yep.
teaching has a flaw, then I want to know
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
it. Yep.
But yeah, I think every new jumper, every experienced jumper, even when they jump new gear, especially, should test to make sure that they know their gear. They know when their cables clear and
Yep.
how far they have to pull in order to get it to fully clear.
Yep. Yep.
And rethink how we do our emergency procedures. What makes sense?
Mhm.
And end of the day is you got to make your own decisions and do what you think is right for you, because in the heat of the moment you're going to fall back to what you practice the most.
Yep.
And it would be very, very hard for me to switch from doing this because that's all I've done since 2005. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, with enough repetition, we can
I
alter our brains.
yep,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, are there questions from the crowd here? Are there topics or areas that you'd like to see this conversation go right now?
I have one, but I want to see if anyone else has one first.
Sure,
Yeah, what's up?
go for it.
It's a less interesting one to probably other people, but first of all, I totally loved that article. When there was a crew dog that sent it to me when I told him I was kind of worried about that kind of stuff, and it was just it was just amazing written article, and I thought like, wow, I would never have found this on my own. So I was talking to my regional director about adding it to the sim, and unfortunately he's a logical guy and practical, and he asked me, well, how many cases, incidents have there actually been where there was a collision at a high enough altitude where this would have helped? So I went through, USBA has the reports, the incident reports. And so I skimmed all of the canopy collision category because they don't have a really good search for it. And the only ones that I found that were at, a high enough altitude that a cutaway might have helped involved body to body impact where somebody was just unconscious or something.
Mhm.
And so I emailed them, who did I email? Ron Bell. So I emailed Ron Bell and I asked to see if there's any other ones that weren't published. And so they did dig one up. That was at a high enough altitude right after deployment. Nothing mentioned about being unconscious or anything like that. But there's just not enough details to know anything. Just
Sure.
one person away, the other person was left with 2 canopies. So there might have been something there. But we're talking like over a decade of incident reports where, for all we know, like none of this information would have even helped. So can you think of any cases or incidents other than CRW where, you know, if only that person had known any of this info, right?
I I can't. And a lot of that reason is because people are pulling too low. And I think that our minimum opening altitudes need to be raised because of this stuff. Most of the canopy collisions are happening, especially on opening, at altitudes and at speeds that don't give us enough time to properly deal with our. I think if we got people's attitudes at 4,000 is a better opening altitude than 3,000, we'd all be a lot safer. And
I agree.
you know, and I think that teaching this would be, you might see some incidents where this would come into place, but with our too low of opening altitudes, there's just not enough time, even if people do get into the type of situation where that would help. So that's right. I don't agree that that's a reason to not put it in there and to not teach it. There's a lot of things in the sim that we almost never see that are totally valid in talking about and thinking about, because it's better to have people thinking about this stuff on the ground and talking about it and discussing it than it is to figure it out on your own, where it's the first time you've ever even, crossed your mind to think about. I mean, they still have in the sim to, oh, well, if you're in this type of situation, you should reach up and pull your RSL pin. That's the last thing I'm going to be thinking about when I'm dealing with these types of emergency situations. And who cares? At that point, so many other things are going wrong. That's the last thing I'm going to be. But we still have that in the sim. A lot of it just comes down to, it's an old school mentality of they don't want to change things and they don't want to have to think about it because somebody else has already thought about it and put it in there, and it's like the gospel. The sim shouldn't be the Bible. It's a living document that should keep evolving. And if the crew community has updated their approach to how they deal with things because of things that we've seen in crew, and and can apply that to everybody, we should be open to updating the sim.
So just, I want to say I agree with you, but I still need to make a case for my regional director, right? And unfortunately, it gets worse. In the last 20 years, there was, Ron basically told me there was 55 canopy collisions, of which only 2 happened during deployment. So even higher, or right after deployment. So even higher opening altitudes, it's still just 2 in the last 20 years. That wouldn't really change much. And now there might be a few other ones that are missing or something, but given
There are
tiny,
there are some that don't end up in anything horrific. I mean, we tend to only view the ones that end in serious injury or death. But the bottom line is, he's right. Statistically speaking, it's very rare that this would occur, and it's very rare that they would be in a situation where that knowledge would help. That being said, having that knowledge and never using it is much better than needing it and not having it.
There it is.
Why not?
man,
Why not?
Why not? No. And I think Chad had a really good point, which is if we pull higher, all of us, the trickle down of the smaller canopies and the relative floating up of the bigger canopies is going to reduce the density. If everybody pulls it
Absolutely.
at between 2 and 2.5, there just isn't the time for that effect to get big enough, right?
Mhm.
So it reminds me of like when we went to, I was at the Lost Prairie Boogie in Montana. Freaking amazing, huge mountains, Glacier National Park's just down the road, and we would do a hop and pop. They called it a cross country. Every airplane on the drop zone, all of Larry Hill's planes, everything that he brought, they one big jump run like Normandy, and everybody do a hop and pop, maybe a couple miles away. You don't want to land out in Montana, right? And so a variety of canopy types, all hop and pop at the same time, but full altitude. You'd sit there and watch, literally 15 minutes of landings. They all jumped at the same time, right? And so the greater the altitude, the greater the vertical distribution of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we bump up our opening altitudes, we could also bump up our cypress fire, and I think that we'd have a lot safer community for that too. I think that a cypress firing at 750 feet is crazy low. It's ridiculous. That's just enough to get the reserve open and break your leg on landing instead of having time to actually do a turn into the wind and flare.
We talked about this last week. Yeah, exactly. I made a video.
It's craziness.
It's got to have New England just sort of walking people through it, so even just a non-rigger can just do their own. It's not that hard. Yeah, I agree.
No, but you have to get that mentality out there that 4,000 is a better opening altitude than 3, or the old timers, like the people that came up with me or before me and pulling it $2,000. Pulling it $2,000 is crazy. I had an old Saber 3 that pulled it. If I pulled it $2,000, I mean, by the time it opened, I'd be chopping because it didn't open fast enough.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, all you need is a Saber 1 then. That's we were
Oh.
the canopies we used back in the 80s, that when we were literally smoking through 2 and throwing. That was normal.
Well, you did a mod.
Bam.
You did a mod for me on my parachute that has my openings much faster because as a crew dog, I don't like that snivel.
People like it. What, a mesh vent did I do?
Yep, you did a mesh vent on my slider.
People love that. Yeah, yeah.
So it gives me a little faster of an opening, a little more.
Yeah,
little quicker pop.
So many people, I say, so how's your opening? Oh, it's good. It's nice and soft. Well, how long does it normally take? About 1,000 feet. No, dude, that's a malfunction that cleared itself.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
If you wanted to be in free fall, you wouldn't have pulled, for God's sakes. So I'm a fan of because these big sliders have a lot of advantages, especially if you like to pull it down behind your head. Nice to have that. Yep. But to have a little air breathing through that slider, it's kind of a throwback concept. But it's so easy to do the mod, and then the parachute just opens.
Yeah, gets funny looks from the Packers though. They're like, "What the hell is this?"
Well, John did it. John did it on the Katana. The Katana opened too slow, and you can see. I mean, I don't know which sizes. It's not all the Katana sizes. They got that mesh strip on the leading edge of the slider too.
Yep.
Yep. Cool. Good.
So yeah, like back to your point. It sounds like you're probably not going to be able to convince him. Certainly not with not by the statistics, because he's right. The statistics aren't there to back it up.
Well, I do have another plan. So this is plan B. So if I couldn't find your statistics, I was gonna get it into the CRW section, because people like myself actually go through and read the sim sections that don't necessarily apply to them.
Yep.
And this would at least get it out to, I don't know, 20% of the skydivers. And over time, because the CRW section right now does not include the information on Rhapsody and Tangle. It just has like a tiny section.
That section desperately needs to be updated. It also, we need to update the canopy work on the AFF modules. And I was actually working with somebody, and I got busy and let that slack. I should get back to that to put some canopy drills in there and hopefully get an approved for a coach jump, that where the coach jumps and does a no contact canopy a crew jump as part of the AFF.
Agreed.
I have a suggestion. Can we start a working group where I know nothing, so I'll just participate by bugging people.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to participate in a group.
Yep, me too.
Maybe.
Me too.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it came down to Al wanted me to write it all up, and I started writing it up, and I got bogged down in the make it pretty and to present, and got busy with life and lost my flair for doing the cleanup versus the coming up with the concept of how to do the jump.
Right.
I mean, I can clean it up. Right now, the sim is in an outline format, and they're trying to rewrite it to be something else. But while it's still in an outline format, we can get in something just to start and work out the rest later. But my regional director actually was on board with this, other than checking whatever, at least with the CRW section. The thing is that he's never done any crew. He doesn't know much about flogging, and so he wanted me to reach out to a bunch of CRW dogs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So with a working group, like he'd be on board, I'm sure other people's regional directors would be, whatever, right? We can get support for this.
Yeah, I mean, I know my regional director is very, very active, very supportive. And it sounds like yours is as well.
Yep. Or your Marianne? Is that who's the Marianne?
Jim Reese now.
Jim Reese is. Oh, okay.
Jim Reese, yeah. Mary Lou retired from being regional director a while ago. It was Mary Lou, and then Al King, and then Al King went and became a national, one of the national slots, and Jim Reese took over as a regional.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I also have been thinking about see if we can squeeze a section on mindfulness awareness, because one of the biggest reasons, if our goal is to prevent canopy collisions, free fall collisions, bad spots that result in people breaking their back off the field, it's about awareness, which is about slowing down and expanding your perspective. And there's training programs that have existed for thousands of years to facilitate that skill. I'm not sure how it could be written, but at the very least, just I figure like one page that says, by the way, your awareness is something that is a variable, depending on how hyper-focused you are on your task. There might be something in your six that you weren't aware of.
Yeah.
Like you're staring at the target and you didn't think about the person that's over here, and then you're like, I should go a little away from the target because I'm going to overshoot, and there's your collision that, all of this fancy crew stuff won't matter if you're at 800 feet.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, thinking about things before they happen allows your brain to recognize, I already know something about this. I already have a plan that I can put into place. Let me pay attention to the other things that are going on. Whereas if this is something brand new to you and you've never thought about anything that's happening right now, you're going to be hyper focused on whatever is happening right at that very second, and you're going to miss something that could have potentially helped, or something that's going to make the situation even worse, because you didn't have the proper training on the ground. You didn't have the proper thought process.
Well, the thought process, exactly, like that flowing experience of the center of the target. What are you looking at the most? I want to get to the formation or whatever that is. Sure, but what about the other things that you are also responsible for? As you're tracking off from your formation, if you're doing RW, one of the things you need to do is be aware of what's below you, because there might be another formation that was separate from your guys that somehow is underneath you. There might be an airplane. Right? These are the things that are a little outside the box from what we train our students, because they're already overwhelmed with the volume of information that's required to just do basic skydiving. But if you want to skydive for a long time, you need to be looking above you before you throw your pilot chute. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You need to be looking for the airliner that's chugging through the drop zone area before you jump out of the airplane. This stuff is real. And to me,
Yeah.
that's the mindfulness awareness piece that I'm referring to. I don't think I'm going to be able to get everybody to an ashram to meditate for a month, but you know what I mean? Maybe not yet. But the idea is to sort of deliberately, give that make it part of the conversation.
Well, the awareness helps you avoid it. I mean, let's be honest, it's knowledge. It's without that, you don't even know what to avoid.
Yep, exactly.
Brian, here's my argument for putting that in the sim is ever since you were talking about taking a deep breath, before opening or before whatever, I've never been able to once remember to take a deep breath because those are all the highest energy moments.
Yep.
And that I'm just going into autopilot because I'm overloaded already. If it had been in the sim when I was learning, I would have gotten that in from the start.
As part of the circle of awareness, right? Heading, altimeter, breath, jump master. You know, build it into our procedures. Downwind leg. What do you do once you point yourself on your downwind leg at 900 feet? You inhale fully, you hold for 3 seconds, and you let it out slowly and expand your view to include more than what you're looking at now, right? That would be really nice to add that as part of our normal procedures. Drew Vaughn, I mean, one of the canopy piloting events, on his forearm, he wrote in huge black magic marker, breathe. He said, breathe. And it was like kind of making fun of him. What are you doing? He's like, no, man, I'm telling you, I always forget, and I need this reminder. It really helps me. And he came in and landed, swoop, landed, and slid it in or whatever. And he's sitting on the ground. And somebody, I don't think it was Jay, walked up and said, did it work? Did you remember to breathe?
I've been bringing a football notes thing, so it just goes on my arm, and I can.
There you go.
And at first it worked. I would actually check it and look at it, but lately I just forget to check it. Yeah. I've just been so I don't remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
And breathe was on there.
Well, the more we remind ourselves to do it, the more we go through visualizations of the jump in real time. In other words, if a skydive takes 40 seconds to get through, well, you should take at least 40 seconds in your visualization. Don't just compress it. You can do the Reader's Digest flow through right before you exit. Okay, fine, but I do think it's very important for people to take their time when they visualize and add within that these other very important things like relax your muscles, relax your neck so that you can see what's going on behind you. Stiff skydivers don't check anything because their neck doesn't move. Right? Like Steve Martin said, right? Steve Martin, he said, I like a woman with a head on her shoulders. I hate necks. That way, we're sitting down in the restaurant and every head turns, except hers, because she's got no neck. That's old Steve Martin stuff. Anyway, cool. So it's already 8:30. That'll do. That's a little different from what we normally do, but it's kind of fun having a visiting expert, eh? I like this, and I want to thank Chad so much for giving your all to
no problem.
Help clarify this stuff. Because it's not just this crowd that watches it, right? We record these, and on our private little website thing called Mighty Networks, only the members will get to see this.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool.
Feel free, any of your members can email me or reach out to me on Facebook. If you have any questions, if you have any, even if it's, hey, I live in this area, do you know of any crew dogs or any resources available to me? Anything, just feel free to reach out.
That's great.
And I'll help out where I can.
Yeah, man. Thank you. So I guess you can say your email here now if you want to, just so it's.
Yeah. So it's the Sedwick, the TheSedwick @gmail.com, or Chad Neidigh on Facebook, or New England Crew. We have a page for the local community here, you can reach out to us that way too.
Yeah, great. And you can send me text of that stuff, and I'll just put it up
Sure.
in the metadata of the video.
Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
private video, but at least this way, all the members, there's quite a few people now,
Sure.
that will watch this video later and be like, I want to talk to that. He actually sounded like he knew what he was talking about.
Well, I pretend well.
Well done.
We all do.
Yeah, that was great. That was great fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Chad.
All right, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for coming.
Each of us is born to be brilliant. We are not born to be boring, to be mundane, and we're not born to toe the line of safety so much that we don't live.